Can you guys hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. So let's resume from where we left yesterday, and then we'll probably any questions from yesterday. I given files. I'll ask you to analyze. Oh, 1 minute. Sorry, there's no presentation. Let me share it. Can you see my screen? Saurabh, can you see my screen? Can anyone confirm if somebody can see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, go through the file, look at how making a smaller chunk improves the performance time. And there's a URL there which you can look at that briefly tells you how does the P2P or BitTorrent kind of network works. So if you look at, there are two servers trying to send data. There are about 4 client peers who's trying to get data. But you see the colors in these two servers, these are the basically chunks. And once any peer will get one chunk, you see a color bar, then you would see this peer would start sending as well. This peer got chunks, you start sending. So this the peer start transmitting. Now see, now this peer start, because got chunk, it start transmitting. Now this will start transmitting. If you want to add more peers, press the key P. You'll get another peer coming up. This peer would join. Press another P. One more peer would come up. If you want to add server, there's a S. If you remove R, press R, one of the peer would go away. And then you see how does this is the way actually BitTorrent works. And once a peer gets the full data, then probably it will only be transmitting and not receiving. It may remain in the network or it may go out of the network. So you can play with this URL, looking at number of peers, number of servers, and then see how does BitTorrent really work. And that basically means each peer, they are the two servers, and each peer not only gets data from others, but it also transmits data to the other people as well. And that's the way basically BitTorrent works.
Sir, if a peer gets the data from server as well as other peers, how it will be in order, sir? Like how it is managed?
Okay, Mandu, looking at the animation. Let me go to.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, tell me. What is the question?
Sir, for example, if this peer is getting from data from all the server as well as other peers, no, sir.
Right.
How will the data be in order?
So each chunk is identified by chunk ID or something. So I could get chunk 1 from peer 1, I could get chunk 10 from another peer, chunk 31 from another one. So I know which chunk it is. Then I put in order.
Sir, but the chunks are identified based on what it has, no, sir. But if, for example, if we take this...
When you divide this, see something like this. Let's say I given you 10-page booklet and ask you, give this 10 pages, make a copy and give to all. So each page you have a page number. So you know which page number it is. Similarly, when you divide the chunk, you do some kind of identification which chunk it is. Okay?
Yes, sir. But how is the, for example, if the server sends chunk number 2, how will be the next peer node that he has to send the chunk?
That's what I'm
chunk
coming
number
to discuss now. That's what I'm actually coming to look at.
Okay.
Okay. But conceptually understand this is how BitTorrent works. It's conceptually it is clear.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay. So let's look at the way typically BitTorrent would work. So we told you concept, the time taken. We are not discussed strategy, how should get chunk one from there, a chunk two from there, but conceptually look at and that's what you could probably implement and do as an assignment as well. So consider that the group of peers who want to exchange files, and file could be divided into, depending on the file size, you could divide it into different chunks. Chunks typical size is 256 kilobits, or it could be larger or smaller, that depends. And then you basically define group of peers who want to transfer or share the file. Those group of peers is called torrent. This torrent could be of size 5, this torrent could be of size 1000. Depends how many peers want to share the content. Let's say you're sharing a video file. So each 10-second clip could act as a chunk. And then you exchange, upload the data, and you look at that part. So for each torrent, people receive and send the chunks, and when they get all the chunks, you combine together and get the file. Now each torrent, there is a unique node which is called tracker. And tracker knows which node are part of this torrent group. So every time a peer joins the torrent group, they tell the tracker, I am there. In fact, periodically, they still tell the tracker that I'm still part of the torrent, part of the group. And if tracker doesn't get to know about peer, then it knows peer has probably gone away. So we're not getting into the detailed protocols, but we're looking at basic concepts of how does the BitTorrent as a technology or product works. Let's say a new peer arrives called Alice. Now how does it know which are the peers? So peer connects to the torrent. It knows who the torrent for a given torrent group is, identifies, and from the tracker, it gets list of all the peers in the group. Actually, it doesn't get list of all the peers. Let's say in the torrent there are 1000 peers. So when new peer Alice comes and contact the tracker will probably give a list of 20, 30, 50. Let's say typically 50 peers out of 1000, not every list. Now this Alice has got a list of all the trackers, and it talks to the trackers and asks them what chunks you got. It gets the list of chunks what each peer has got, and now decide that I need to get the data, start communicating with peers and get the chunk. We look at which chunk it has to obtain first. So initially Paris would have no chunk. So look at initially Paris would have no chunk and is going to slowly accumulate chunks after communicating with the peers. It registers with the tracker, get the list of peers. Peer give the subset of peers, not all the peers, because that means too many. Now, tracker could determine the nearest to you, tracker gives you random number, that depends on the tracker efficiency. Just a minute. Joy, I'm in a class. I'll call you at 10. And then start connecting, get the list of chunks with each peers, and then start downloading chunks, and as well as whatever chunk this Alice or the new peer got, it start sending chunks to other peers. Now peer may come, peer may go, and peer has to keep updating the tracker saying I'm still there, so the tracker knows which are the peers. And if tracker doesn't get updates from a given peer, it will assume that the peer has particularly gone. Something like that. Now once a peer has got the entire file, it is up to the peer whether to remain still in the group or get out of the group. Whether you have a question? If you have a question, you can ask me. Otherwise, you can probably keep the mic on mute. So what happens is the following. How does and which chunk I should get? Objective is that each chunk has to be given to everybody. Now each chunk has to be given to everybody, and Alice has got the list. Let's say there are 3 peers. Peer 1 says it has got chunks 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Other peer says it has got chunk 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, something of that kind. So let's say peer 1 says it has got chunk 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Peer 2 says it has got chunk 1, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8. Peer 3 says it has got chunk 5, 7, 8, 9, 10, and let's say these are the chunks. Now, what chunks this Alice should request? And the strategy being used is called rarest first. Rarest first means look at those chunks which are with least number of peers. Because if you look at the chunk which is with everybody, then that chunk would be almost with everybody and then take more time. But if you look at the chunks which are the least with least number of peers, and you get that chunk, then you're populating that chunk. You want to basically make sure that chunks are fairly equally distributed. So if you request a chunk which is your maximum peers, you are not actually helping out. But if you request a chunk which is the least available, then you're spreading that and make sure that chunks get quickly shared with others. So peer request for what is called rarest first means it asks for those chunks which are with the least number of peers, and that way is try to create an equilibrium that all chunks get fairly distributed. And how does it send chunks? When I requested the peers to give me the data, it started giving me that. Now it looks at who are the peers who are giving me data at the highest rate. Among all those peers, who gives me data at the highest rate? It looks at 4 such peers and starts sending data to them, and this is what is called unchoking the peers. So look at those 4 peers which are sending data at the highest rate, and that's called peers unchoked. And I send my data. Now network conditions keep on varying. Today peer 1 may be sending at the highest rate, but after a while this peer may have a network issue, may not send the highest rate. So I need to periodically evaluate my current unchoked peers. So every 10 seconds, you reevaluate which are the topmost 4 peers, and I'll send data only to those top 4 peers. But if I get only current list, then I need to look at the new peers may have joined, and they may be giving data to me, may give me data at the higher rate. So every 30 seconds, I'll randomly pick another peer, unchoke it, and start sending data, and ask data from that guy. And if that peer belongs to the top 4, I'll replace one of the existing top 4 peers and bring this into my peer list. So basically this is called optimistically unchoke this peer and then see if this peer is good, then it joins the top 4 group, otherwise I have top 4. So let me repeat, at any point in time, different peers would have different chunks. It will keep asking the list of chunks from each peer. It identifies which chunk is with the least number of peers, and this is a strategy. When you got a list from each peers, which is the chunk which is with least number of peers, you get that chunk. Because you want to popularize, make sure each chunk is available with everybody. That's why distribution could be faster. And then this technique is called rarest first. That means get those chunks which are the least number of peers. Now, which peers I send data? All the peers are sending data. I measure the rate at which they're transferring me data. Identify the top 4, highest rate, and I call them unchoked peers mean I will send data to only those top 4. And then every 10 seconds, I reevaluate my top 4 because there could be other peer who could send me data at the higher rate. And then I'll unchoke that peer and keep evaluating. But this is from the current peers which are sending me data. I can look at some other peer as well which is not sending me data, connect to it, start getting a data, and if that peer sends me data at a better rate or higher rate, I'll bring that peer into my list of top 4, and that's called I optimistically unchoke a peer. If the peer belongs to my top 4 group, I bring into that group, otherwise I have my 4 peer group. And that is how data is being shared. So you can probably look at when Alice optimistically unchokes Bob, it connects to Bob, Bob starts sending data, and if Bob is sending data at the higher rate than others, then Alice chooses Bob as top 4 providers, and then data action continue and remove the least provider. And that's how basically chunk happens. This technique is basically what is called tit for tat, meaning I will send data to those who sends me at a faster rate. It's something like we do. I'll help those first who has helped me in the past. Let's say you want to share your notes, and you need to share the notes with classmates. So you'll first share notes with those people who has given you notes in the past, rather than somebody else. Because you want to be equally mutual beneficial, you need to be encouraged. If people help you want to help them out first. And that technique is what is called tit for tat. Of course, there are mechanism, techniques, people can misuse it, abuse it, but for all practical purposes, it does not happen, and it works beautifully. If it was not for tit for tat strategy, BitTorrent wouldn't have been that successful as it is today. So just to summarize our peer-to-peer architecture, we looked at P2P architecture. We said there is no server which is required to run on time. There is no fixed IP address. Peers come and go. Peer doesn't have to remain permanent. When a peer joins, it talks to a tracker. There's a BitTorrent approach. Tracker gives a subset of peers. Now the new peer, for example Alice, get the list of chunks from all those peers, identify the rarest first chunks, meaning chunks which are least present, get those chunks, identify the top 4 providers, start sending data to them, and that's the way data action happens. And after a peer has got full data, it may remain in the network. That means I'm being helpful to others, or I could be selfish. Just because I got my movie, why should I waste my bandwidth and get out? Depends. So challenge always remains, how do you incentivize a user to remain in the network so that all other people get benefited? Because if you are being helped by others, we should also help others, but that generally doesn't happen, so it depends. So that is still a challenge, but more or less it works, and that is what BitTorrent technology is. So tomorrow, next lecture, we'll look at distributed hash table. The way you discover, the way you maintain the chunks, identifies, the way you obtain it. But we looked at the basic mechanism of peer-to-peer communication and the way chunks happen. Any questions? Otherwise, I'll move to the question paper and go through the answers. Any questions so far? If none, let me move to IE1 question paper, and I hope to correct your question papers over the weekend. So probably Monday you should get your evaluations. First question was more of a theory. Some of you copied from the notes, didn't read the book. Very rarely, whatever I've seen about 20 answer sheets, not a single one has answered that in peer-to-peer, more the number of peers, it scales better. In client-server technology, more the number of clients, scaling becomes an issue, performance becomes an issue, but with peer-to-peer architecture, more the number of peers, better it becomes. Security, implementing security, identifying a challenge for government, it becomes much better for client-server architecture, but in peer-to-peer, because you don't know where the peers are, they come and go, it's difficult to control. So law enforcement agency has a challenge in monitoring and managing that part. Others are normal, like client server could be choked, server has to get all the data, server has to be up and running, but peer can keep on coming and going, and that kind. Now let me look at question number 2. I'm not sure how many of you really wrote any socket program. As I said, unless you practice, you won't know. And all the 20 questions or 15 question paper I have seen, I get to see a correct answer for the entire question. Bit disappointed, but that means you haven't practiced yet. So this is a plain server code. If you look at, I'm creating a socket with dgram. That means this is a UDP socket and I'm doing a binding, so I'm running a UDP server. If I'm running a UDP server, no TCP client would be able to connect. So very first question, the second question, that output display at the client window, TCP client, when TCP client tries to connect, connection itself would fail, it won't connect, and nothing would happen, and the client would simply come up. Now what happens on the server window? As I said, look at the X, and X is the last digit of USN. Let's say your last digit of USN is 5. That means even the server is reading the full data, it is reading in the network layer, UDP is delivering the full data, server is reading only 15 bytes, 10 plus 5, 15, and others would be discarded. So if client is sending data, hello, comma, welcome to the networks, so server would receive only first 15 characters in the buffer. So that would be hello 5 character, comma 6, space 7, welcome is 7, again 14, plus 1 space. So server would receive only hello, comma, welcome space, and that is what would be displayed, and other data would be discarded. If it was a TCP server, it's a byte stream oriented, and it will get each byte in the next read. In UDP, you read the whole message, and whatever buffer size is, you read only that much that you discarded. So it's important that I said very clearly that in UDP server, you make sure you should know what the buffer size is, otherwise give the 65K to get full buffer. So if your last digit is 5, server would display only first 15 characters, even though client is sending the about 20 characters or maybe 22. So what does a UDP client would receive? Because now server is converting to uppercase and sending only 15. So client would receive hello, comma, welcome in capital letters. If a large digit happens to be, let's say 1, that means you receive only 11 characters, and the 11 characters would be hello, 5, 6, 7, and this much. So this answer was unique to each student, and that what should be. So only 1 or 2 has given correct answer to probably first part, but really I need to find the right answer for number 2 and number 3. Any questions on this? If any questions, feel free, otherwise I'll move to the next one. This question is, do you understand the meaning of status code 200 and 304? Again, I requested you, analyze it, play with the web, look at the capture, look at how much data it is. As I said, your bandwidth happens to be 10 plus x, where the x is, let's say your last digit of USN is 5. That means your bandwidth is 15 megabits per second. Now, when you get status code 200, server would send the entire file. Now, entire file is 10 megabytes. That means 80 megabits. Server would send 80 megabits. Your bandwidth happened to be 15 megabits. So it will probably take you 5.3 seconds to receive this file. Plus your 1000 bytes of header, which is again 8000 bits. 8000 bits by 15 Mbps would probably give you about 500 milliseconds. So time taken when you have status code 200, time taken would be around 5.85 seconds. But if status code is 304, you are not getting the entire file, you are only getting that use from the cache, and that means only you are getting is the header, which is about 1000 bytes. That means 8000 bits. 8000 bits at 15 Mbps, you only get about 500 milliseconds. So if you do status code 200, it will take you about 5.8 seconds. Versus if you get status code 304, it takes you only half a second, and that is where the performance difference is. And that is what trying to look at performance of the HTTP protocol. In one case, it will take 5.5, between 5 and 6 seconds, another case half a second, so 10 times difference, and that will vary upon depending on the bandwidth and depending on the apps. And that is what the question was. And unfortunately, none of you has so far whatever evaluated, none of you has given the right answer. So it's imperative that you practice, otherwise you'll have a tough time. I had not asked you in the 2A what data integrity or timing and throughput means. In the open book exams, you can always copy paste the answer, it doesn't make sense. Question was in terms of YouTube, what does this mean? YouTube runs over HTTP. HTTP runs on top of TCP. So data integrity is provided by TCP. Even though YouTube you can afford to lose frame because it's displaying a simply video, but because it is using TCP and TCP provide data integrity, so YouTube, the communication data integrity would be honored. Timing, TCP does not provide any timing guarantee. So if you get frame late, if some frame is lost, to be retransmitted, you get a buffering, and if the more time is taken, user get a bad experience. So YouTube is very sensitive to timing. Throughput again, if your bandwidth is, let's say you're watching a movie, and which requires about 4 Mbps, and your network speed is 2 Mbps, you will be doing enough buffering. So you will want to make sure that the throughput should be at least more than your what is the movie rate at which you want to transmit. If throughput is less than that, you should have a lot of hiccups, bad user experience. Security, from YouTube perspective, unless you are doing a paid authentication or a paid movie, if you are watching a free video, then confidentiality is not important, authentication is not important, you can simply go to YouTube and watch any video. But if you are watching a paid movie, then authentication is important, confidentiality is important, we want to look at it. And integrity, of course, the TCP honors, and that is what this question was. So given the question, look at how do you really apply YouTube to the online class. Since our online classes, we are uploading on the YouTube, which is free, so confidentiality authentication does not matter. Unless we are trying to do an exam, online exam, then probably it will matter. So to look at in this context and then answer. Any questions? I'll move to 2B. So look at 2B. This is the list of HTTP requests, and this is the headers and a status line for HTTP response. One question is, when the web page is displayed, Will it be a formatted page or page with raw contents? I've given you a demo. How the web page is displayed depends upon the content type. Content type is text plain. Text plain means browser would display the content as it is, will not format it. So it will display in the raw. So answer would be, it will not format it, it will display as a raw content. Did the user enter the URL manually or did the user click on a link? In the request, you see a header called referrer. Whenever you get a referrer, that means user has clicked on a link. So in this case, user clicked on a link which was worksoftware.pixel.txt. So it was a clicked link and not entered URL. Your friend says the actual size of the content displayed is not 153. Do you agree? It says content length is 153. Yes, that means what a web server has sent is 153 bytes. But web server is also telling you content encoding is zip. That means what web server sent you is zip content. When browser has to display, it has to unzip it. And unzipping will make the content size more than 153 because compression would be removed. So 153 could become 300, 500, 600, whatever, but certainly going to be a lot more than 153. So yes, the friend is right because content displayed is not 153, but a lot more than 153. But so far, I haven't seen anybody explaining why it is not 153. And unless you play with it, you will not know. Next is, in the request, if modified since, if the value changed to this, now ABCD is the last digit of cell phone number. So if ABCD value happens to be less than 2717, if ABCD value is less than 2717, then status code would be 304. If value of ABCD happens to be more than 2717, then it will send the full content. Just a minute. Ganga, I'm in a class. I'll call you after half an hour. Next question, does it use persistent connection? Look at the client header. Client says connection is keep alive. That means client would like to have a persistent connection. But is there a keep alive header in the response? No. So server is not ordering anything. Server is not even saying connection close, server is not saying connection keep alive. So most likely this is not a persistent connection because server is not given any indication, so it simply goes away. What is the preferred language for the browser? Look at the language, accept language. Preferred language always appears first. So preferred language happens to be Hindi, India. So if possible, browser would like the content to be in Hindi and not in any other language. And then only look at English. So preferred language is Hindi and not anything else. And this is what the answer to 2B is. Let us look at the 2C. The server is sending 3 cookies. It is sending expires along with the message. Now, whenever both the headers are present, it is the message that takes precedence. That means in all the cases, you have a message, so expires has no meaning because if you look at the expires, you wrote the exam on 5th, so this expire would anyway would have expired. So we'll look at the message. Now it says 55 plus x seconds. Let's say x is equal to 4. The last digit of USN is 4. That means you refresh the browser after 59 seconds. And what you are typing? Workshops web. This is the URL and path. Now first cookie organization is equal to ACCS. It is applicable to path workshop/programs. That means this cookie would be sent only when URL contain workshop does programs. But URL is works of webs, so this cookie would not be applicable. Let's look at other cookies. Other cookies says secure. This also says secure. And this request is HTTP, not HTTPS. Because it is HTTP and other two cookies, journal and topic, they say secure, so those cookies also would not be sent. So that means in this request, no cookie would be sent at all, and doesn't really matter whether you refresh less than 60 seconds or more than 60 seconds, because first cookie is applicable to the path, works of as programs, which is not the path in the URL. Other cookies are applicable to HTTPS because of secure, but this URL is HTTP, so browser would not send any cookie at all along with this request. Next question was simple. I said recursive DNS. Now n is your say 5 plus x, where last digit of USN. So assuming your last digit of USN is 4, that means number of iterative DNS query happens to be 9. And we say it takes k star y millisecond for each iterative. So that means first DNS will take y millisecond, second would take 2y millisecond, third DNS iteration 3y millisecond, and so on and so forth. So it will be y plus 2y plus 3y up to 9y. That means it will become 45y, and whatever the y value is, you know the last three numbers in millisecond, that much time it would take. And Z is the first digit of cell phone, which is the actual page, so you can do 45y plus Z, and that's the time taken to display the web page. Next was, I said, look at SMTP protocol, and said use persistent connections. That means you make a single server. So primarily your communication would be something like this. Let me see, let me change the preferences so that become a little better. So first you basically connect, and then you can say NC to the server, whatever email server is. Port number 25. Then you basically say hello, ksit dot whatever domain I have given you, csc.ksit.local. Server would give a response 250 something. Then you say user, your USN number 1ks 18cs, whatever that is. Server would give you 331 indicating password required. Then you say pass, which is a cell phone number, let's say 987, whatever cell phone number is. And then you basically say that one mail to info. So you will say mail from your email address, your USN at csc.ksit.local. Say received to info at yourself.com, and data type whatever data is given. Hello, I am USN so and so. You type the data, and then dot. You are not quitting anymore because I'm using persistent connection. I'll do a second mail. So again, I would say receive to. Receive to second mail is contact mail from USN at whatever USN is, csc.ksit.local, data, this second data, then over, and then you do a quit. Most of you have done quit in both the emails, and that means you're not using persistent connection. And that's the error most of you had made. This is 3B. Let's look at 4A. So you have two files, CNQP and CN question paper and CN answers. We said you are behind a firewall. behind a firewall means after login, you have to issue a passive command. So once you connect, you say nc whatever your IP address is and port number 21. Then you basically say user, your username, password, whatever password is, and then you need to get a file. And since you are behind a firewall, server has to be giving you port number and not you. Now when you issue the command passive, server would respond 227 spectators code and say port number is, it will give 10, 200, 0, 213, and we are saying the port number here. So first port number is X. Let's say the last 4 digit happens to be 2561. I'm assuming last 4 digits. If you divide by 256, it becomes 10 is the quotient and 1 is the remainder. So if last 4 digit 256, you will basically type 10 and 1. This is the port number, and then you'll basically retrieve cnqp.pdf, and then answer would be file transferred. Then you again do passive, server would respond 227 port 10, 200, 0, 213, and port number happens to be last 4 digit. So let's say the last 4 digit happens to be some 90009897. You divide by 256. Whatever you get remainder, those quotient and remainder comes here, whatever quotient value and the remainder value comes here, and that is what you are looking at. And then you say retrieve cn.anl.pdf, and this is what the communication you are looking at. So if you had tried FTP protocol, you would have known. If you had not tried, then you would not know. Syllabus says you need to know the commands, and this precisely the commands we are trying to look at. This was question number 4a. Question number 4b was similar. Using a POP3 client, server always give a response either plus OK or minus error. So first you connect on port number, IP address port number 110. You would say user, your USN number, server would say plus OK, then you say pass, your password number, server would say plus OK, then you get a list, it will give you list, 1 is whatever size, 2 whatever size, it will give you up to 10. Now question was, whatever digits are, second digit or cell number, and you are retrieving those emails and delete those emails. So what you say is, let's say your 2 digits are 6 and 9, then you would say retrieve 6, you would say it will display the content, retrieve plus OK, give the content of the message, then you say retrieve 9, server would give you content which is with plus OK, and then you say delete 6, delete 9, and do a quit, and this is what we are looking at as the answer to this 4b. And that's all what was expected. This was the answers. Any question, let me know. Otherwise, I'm done for the class today. Any